What changed for Chris Duarte from year 1 to 2 that made him the expendable wing guard on the Pacers? We'll talk about that, Pacers Summer League Game 5, and comments from Tyrese Haliburton at his camp this weekend, all on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today I want to dive backwards into Chris Duarte's time with the Pacers, what changed from year 1 to 2 that made him an all-rookie team guy considered part of this core with Haliburton and Mathurin to build forward with, 2, the most expendable wing guard type that was moved this summer. Plus, Summer League Game 5. Yuck. The end of Summer League is gross. We'll cover that today. And then Tyrese Haliburton held a camp in India over the weekend. Got to talk to him about Obi Toppin, Summer Pacers, his offseason, a lot more. Talk about everything he had to say as this week progresses. Tomorrow, Kalen Cooper will join us to talk Pacers Summer League, everything you need to know about the guys who played. We'll talk about the other moves around the league that impacted the Pacers. We'll grade the Pacers offseason, and then Friday we'll get into something else that you'll find out later in the week. A couple more fun topics coming the rest of this month, but we are in the fun part of the NBA calendar, waiting on big stuff to happen currently in that holding pattern for the Pacers. But we'll look backwards. I want to talk about Chris Duarte. I've gone on Locked On Kings with Matt George and Kings Pulse with Brendan Nunez in the last couple of days talking about Duarte and his fit in Sacramento, and they both had a similar question. Why was he worse in year 2 with the Pacers than year 1? And I thought that was an interesting thing that led to him being traded, right? Because, a big part of this is, it's not hard to figure out, they had a lot of 2-3 types, right? Ben Shepherd was drafted, and he isn't even in this discussion because the discussion is really between Nesmith, Brown, Mathurin, Hield, and Nembhard. You can't play all those guys, and if you do, then TJ McConnell's not playing, and they currently have a logjam. I've discussed that a lot, and that's without Duarte in the mix. They just had too many guys for the minutes available, and thus all these players, some of them at least, the ones who weren't going to play, had more value to other teams than the Pacers. So it made sense for the Pacers to move him, but why was Duarte the one who was not going to play? Why was he obviously on the outside? I think that merits an investigation and what can be learned from it. Because, and to be clear, I'm not talking about like what can be learned from drafting, right? Drafting for fit or age or anything like that. Like, he was a good rookie and a good player on this team. It's just something changed in year 2, and that's the lesson I wanted to figure out with a young player. If you remember, like, Chris Duarte's first 10 to 15 games was amazing. Like, he hit 2+ threes at basically all of them. He had that 27-point first outing. He was ridiculous. He was like the leader for Rookie of the Year for a month in the NBA. He was ridiculous to start his career, and Kevin Durant's gassing him up, and he was still good in like January of his rookie year in 2022. He hit 40% from 3 that month, and then this past season was just none of that, right? He started off cold. He had a 30-point game. Then the injury comes. He misses 21 in a row, and then is just wobbly at best, mostly down for a while. His next good stretch comes right before another injury. Couldn't score. Couldn't make open shots. That was, if you listened every day during the season, what part of my thesis was for a while. He was taking good shots. In fact, still now, if you look at the numbers, the percentage of shots Chris Duarte took as a sophomore or a second-year player in the NBA that were considered open or wide open by NBA.com was a higher percentage than his first season. So based on that, you could say he's taking better shots. He's taking more open shots. He's getting open. He knows how. He's just not making them. So for a while, I thought, they'll go in. I've seen them go in. I saw him for a whole year make the exact shots he's missing. But at some point, that discussion changed, and it had to, even in my head, to he's just not going to make them. They're not going in, right? He shot under 37% from the field last year. His true shooting percentage was under 50. That's brutal. That's terrible. And this is right after a promising shooting first season. So what changed? One theory I have is it could have been the lack of Domantas Sabonis, who he pairs very well with. And in his introduction to Kings Media in Vegas, if you can find the videos of that out there, he talked a lot about their relationship off the court and on the court being imperative to him. And if you go back to his rookie year, with the Pacers. Remember, we're talking about a 25-win team right now when I bring up these net ratings. The Pacers with neither Duarte or Sabonis on had a net rating of minus 5.3. With Sabonis on and Duarte off, minus 3.1. With Duarte on and Sabonis off, minus 6.5. So every number I've said so far is awful, right? And reflective of a 25-win team. But when they shared the court, when Chris Duarte and Sabonis were both on, the Pacers had a net rating of plus 1.5. That's a credible team. They were good with those two guys sharing the floor. They had good chemistry. Sabonis knew where Duarte was going to be. He could get him open with his screening, his handoffs. It was just repeatable actions Duarte could learn from and grow from, and they fit well together. After the trade, he was okay, right? He had that 18-point game in the first game after the trade deadline, but really sputtered and was hurt the rest of the season and was never that same player. That's one theory. I could hear that. It could have been injuries that changed Chris Duarte's second season. Obviously, he had that really big game and was looking like he was fitting in Brooklyn. 30 points. One of his best games ever, his whole career. Not just of last season, his whole career. That is still, to this day, his highest scoring game. The very next game, he rolls his ankle on Kyle Lowry and misses over 6 weeks. And he talked about, again, with Kings Media, the injuries playing a factor in his season last year and potentially feeling like he rushed back a little bit and stuff like that. That could matter, right? You obviously cannot. If he says it, I have to believe it, and you can see it. And I think another part of the injury was the timing of the season where he only played the first 9 games. And Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith got the first 30 games to grow as the off-ball guard wing guys and Mathurin for the Pacers last year. And he did not get that opportunity. So they had built chemistry and grown their effectiveness with the new look team while Duarte was sidelined. He could not do that. Another thing that I considered in what made Chris Duarte not as effective last season is the change in pace, right? The team played way faster this past season. Their average seconds per offensive possession when Duarte was in the game was almost a quarter second slower than when he was on the bench. That's not by itself a bad thing, but I think he's better when the offense is slower. I think that's maybe not obvious, but like the stuff he's good at, repeatable actions, patterns, all that kind of stuff, you could see that he's better at that kind of thing. And during his rookie season, you look at the seconds per average possession on offense, with him on the court, 14.8. That's over a full second slower than this past season, and he was better that year. I think that the pace was part of it, and the other part of it was the random stuff. The Pacers even describe their offense sometimes as random, and that's effective. It's harder to defend and scout if you're really good at it. For Chris Duarte, a guy who's very good at structure and knowing when to cut and knowing who to cut off of, that's harder, especially when he lost 21 games early in the season to grow chemistry. These are a lot of things that I think played into his poor season, but it also hurts, I guess. It also is another point for the argument that the team's defense was terrible when he was on the court last year. They defended 4 points per 100 possessions worse. Oh, sorry. The team's defense was still worse, but not that much. It was still worse with him out there last year. That was something he was good at his first year. That doesn't matter as well. 118 defensive rating with him out there. Brutal. So every point of evidence says he was just flat out worse last year. Even the stuff he was good at, shooting threes, right? 37% his first year. Not so good. 31.6% year 2. Defensive rating wasn't as good. Like everything was worse. And so you have to look at everything. Injuries, fit, stylistic changes. So what can be learned from this? What can we learn from a player thriving in year 1, looking very promising, being a guy considered in the core? He starts opening night for a team entering a rebuild and is now off the team less than a year later. What happened? What can be learned from this? For me, what I'm going to lodge in my brain is a lot about fit and style. And style is going to be the big one here. When a team changes identities, even good players have to adjust. And I've known that, but now you can really see it, right? Even the Kings, the other side, where Chris Duarte is headed, they changed styles a little bit when it became the Fox Sabonis show, the Fox and the Ox instead of Fox and Haliburton. And hey, that was great for them. A lot of players played better in that style. And I think Duarte lost a lot when the team lost, not in a bad way. This sentence sounds like it's a negative thing. This is just something that happened. When the team lost its structure somewhat intentionally, I think that hurt Chris Duarte's effectiveness. I think that hurt what he was good at. He's good when he knows that After some action happens on the other side of the court, he flows up to the top. If he gets the ball, he pitches into a DHO, and he's ready to read and react, and he's done it with Sabonis' screening a million times or Miles Turner screening a million times. What he's not as good at is, okay, the ball's coming up the floor, and someone has to decide who's setting a screen really quick, and then, okay, assess what the defense did. Okay, now react to that, and it's just, you're thinking a lot, and it's harder and without a lot of reps, and Duarte lost a lot of those reps. So I think, for me, the big takeaway is going to be about the fit and style, because he did efficient things. They just never went in. At what point does the process not matter if the shots never go in? I was having trouble figuring that out, but at some point, it obviously became a story of Duarte's not making the shots. It doesn't matter that they're open. So for me, the thing I'll think about with young players a lot is style. How much can a change of style and situation, not necessarily by a trade, because Chris Duarte wasn't traded. He stayed on the Pacers. But how much can a style change for the team or the lineups they're a part of help them? And that lesson can be applied to other players, right? For example, TJ McConnell, first year under Rick Carlisle, was good, but clearly the sped-up play, the random actions, the read and react, he's good at creating some of those read and react scenarios. That was better for him. That change was better for him in a way that it was not good for Duarte, right? It's not like it was a negative change for everybody. So I think this taught me a lot about style's impact on certain players, especially young players, and a lot about early career and early season samples, because we'd only seen 1 year of data for Chris Duarte. And people always say give draft picks time. Some people say that it takes 3 years to really assess it. And I think it goes kind of both ways on that, where you need time in a system and an identity as well. So I think because of all this, the Kings are a fast team, but they're more structured. I think Chris Duarte will do better last year, but this trade still made sense for the Pacers. They had to clear up a logjam, and there's just so many factors involved in this to say what the exact reason Chris Duarte's second year was so much worse than his first year was. It's probably a little bit of all of them, but to me, the style change is the thing that hurt him the most, and he'll do well next year. And for the Pacers specifically, the style change was the right decision. So in the end, it was just an unfortunate overlap of situations for the team and the player, and the Pacers will now move forward with their new guard wing rotation. If you think that was stupid or you disagree with any of that, I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East, or comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. Summer League happened on Sunday. Man, is the end of Summer League brutal. Jarris Walker did not play, but a couple other interesting young Pacers players did play. What did we learn from that game? What are the key takeaways? Isaiah Wong looked really good as a scorer. Let's talk about that here in segment number 2. Before we drive into all that, though, let me talk to you guys about PrizePicks. PrizePicks daily fantasy made easy. It's simple. Here's what PrizePicks is. Will Mike Trout have more or less than 1.5 hits tonight? That's it. You pick 2 to 6 players. Will they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection on any number of stats? You could pick a number of different baseball players, or go to football guys or basketball guys, whatever. You can have up to 25 times your money on any entry. It's not you versus other people, it's you versus PrizePicks projections, which is what I love about it. And they offer projections on any sport you watch. You can make your picks in 60 seconds or less. It's super easy, it's safe, it has fast withdrawals, and it's operational in over 30 states and Canada. They have Summer League stuff if you're interested in the title game between the Cavs and Rockets tonight. Download the PrizePicks app or go to PrizePicks.com. Sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. You get the idea, but don't forget, enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. Daily fantasy made easy. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, Locked On Rockets or Locked On Cavs, the two teams in the championship game of Summer League. Yes, there's a championship game of Summer League. The Rockets Summer League team is super good. Check out either of those shows to get more on some young guys doing good stuff in Vegas. Speaking of Vegas, Pacers done. They wrapped it up on Sunday against the Detroit Pistons in Game 5. And Jarris Walker didn't play. Young guys, the top pick for the Pacers has typically not played all 5 games. Duarte, I believe, only played 4. Mathurin last year only played 3. It's just not something that the team and most teams typically do. Asar Thompson did not play for Detroit. Neither did Jaden Ivey. I think he only played in their first or second game anyway. It's just not something that happens. Teams have seen enough. They get it. They're not playing for the playoffs anymore. Just rest the guy. Get a view at some of these other guys. And so without Walker, obviously things were going to be a little different on the defensive end, and he was creating shots a little bit and handling the ball. So Clearly a change in structure coming for the Pacers, and it was very clear to me and anyone watching this game that they were going to struggle to create shots. They've had that problem every game since Nembhard and Mathurin stopped playing, and they did it again. They finished the game with 11 assists. Not one player. The whole team had 11 assists. Their leading assists guy was Isaiah Wong with 3. The only other guys with more than 1 were Ethan Thompson and Darius McGee, 2 guys without NBA contracts right now, who both played pretty well, by the way. But the Pacers just couldn't create shots. They were so reliant on isolation scoring and forcing some turnovers, but they didn't even force that many, and some offensive rebounds, but they didn't even have that many to actually get shots. Now, some of the reasons they didn't have assists is they actually did a good job drawing fouls, and you can't get an assist unless you make the shot. They had 28 free throws. They did some good stuff from the attacking perspective. Isaiah Wong leading that charge. 11 free throw attempts for Wong. We'll talk about him in a second. But in general, stylistically for the Pacers with the group they had, they could not create shots. Their guards are better scorers than passers. McGee can really shoot it. He took 5 threes. Wong can really score it. He had 24 points and took 7 threes. Neither of those guys are good setup men. Eli Brooks is okay at it. He actually started at point guard today, but he only had 1 assist. He didn't really set up that much either. So the team was really struggling to get... If you're a play finisher for the Pacers, this was a tough game for you. Like Oscar Tshiebwe was 3 for 7. For example, Kendall Brown, 1 for 4. So that all makes sense, and that context is important when analyzing players. They weren't necessarily, they were playing different roles than they'll play, ideally. But a couple stuff that I wrote down that I wanted to know. A couple things I wrote down that I wanted to know. One, Oscar Tshiebwe. I knew this. This is what he was in college. That dude just scoops up the boards, man. It's 15 minutes, he had 6 rebounds. He's just a beast on the inside. He only had 7 points, but 2 blocks. His interior defense looks good. That is something that I'll be curious about with him in the G League this year on his 2-way deal. We know he can rebound. That's his thing. That skill is going to translate to basically any level. When you think about what other skills he could have that he could grow, rim protection seems like the best one for him given what he's currently good at because he's around the rim a lot. If he could be a really good rim protector, really good around the basket defender, that would go a long way in helping him potentially be on a path to the NBA. And in this game, he had some good screens as well. This was one of his better games to me, even though he went 3 for 7. I thought that was very noteworthy. And I was definitely watching him in Fort Wayne, even though the Mad Ants of Fort Wayne are playing in Indy this year, just to see how good he looks. Early in the game, I wrote in my notes that Isaiah Wong was forcing shots, but that became an asset for the Pacers because he was forcing good shots. He took 13 of them. He made 6 of them, but on 2-pointers, he was struggling. When he tried to go inside the arc, he was struggling. When he went from deep, he did very well. 5 for 7 from deep, and a lot of his 2s were wiped off the board as shot attempts because he got to the line so much. This was his best game of Summer League by a mile, and something I've talked about with Isaiah Wong quite a bit is, yeah, he's like point guard sized and kind of handles the ball, but he's definitely more of a scorer than a setup man. In this game, he proved that again. Even though he was point guard in some lineups, only 3 assists, but 24 points was his final tally. 5 for 7 from deep, 7 of 11 from the foul line. He was doing a great job of making it happen as a scorer. They needed somebody to do it, given who was available, and no one was having a good time or was really able to do it. Like Ethan Thompson was their best scorer for a stretch or two. Isaiah Wong really stepped up in the scoring department in this game, and Pacers were down 6 with only a few minutes to go. They got blown out, but they were in this game, and his scoring, especially in the fourth, was a big reason why. As he develops this season, I think he'll be, a decent scorer at the G League level. Can he show more of that playmaking? Because he did not have a ton of it in this game, even though I think he did play well and probably had his best game of Summer League. Ethan Thompson, not many know about him. His first year with the Pacers in their orbit had a pretty good game with 8 points off the bench. Robert Woodard, the second, had 11 rebounds. Darius McGee was getting to the line and creating a little bit. He had 10 points. Those 3 of the bench brigade for these last 3 games all probably had their best games of Summer League at the same time. Ethan Thompson in general, I always have one guy who I hadn't been in the Pacers orbit before Summer League that always stands out to me. He'd be the one this year. He had some moments. But the Pacers fell apart in the third quarter. It was gross. They only scored 16 points. They gave up 26. Their lead was gone. They never got it back. The bright spot of the second half, there were some ugly clunkers late in the third specifically, but for the whole half, Ben Shepherd was better after a yucky first half. He only finished with 12 points, but finding his shots in this game with the shot creation they had was good for him. His ability to chop his feet and be in front of his man on defense was good. The only guy who really tore up the Pacers at all was Marcus Sasser, who was amazing. He had 40 points. That was the best game scoring-wise from any player in Summer League. Nobody else really killed them. So Shepherd was, for the second game in a row, And for all three of his good-ish games in Summer League, much better in the second half than the first half. In general, the Pacers were very inconsistent on the offensive end, and that mixed success for Shepherd was something. So for him, interesting. Like, he played 10 halves of Summer League, and I would say 3.5 of them were good. And when he was good, he was really good, right? The shots are falling. He looks unguardable. He's a little shifty. But at his worst on offense, he just looks invisible. So I'm very curious what that will look like in the NBA, because he's one of the guys who I would say played a role consistently the closest to what he'll play in the NBA out in Vegas. Everybody else either played a bigger role or an altered role for skill development reasons in general. Kendall Brown was not particularly great in this game. After a really strong start to Summer League, he really tapered off near the end. And Mojave King was also not very good in this game. In fact, he had 1 turnover, 1 foul, and that was his only stats besides some free throws. So, whimper of an ending for the Pacers. 2 big losses over the weekend to close out Summer League, but they're done. They're done. Nobody got hurt. I think that's great news. They definitely saw a lot of micro skill, important stuff from Jarris Walker. They saw some important development from some of the returning guys, and they learned what needs to be worked on for some of the young guys. That's important for more Summer League breakdowns. We'll get all the key players, the Pacers' defense, their style, everything tomorrow with Kaylin Cooper from Basketball She Wrote. I cannot wait to dive into that. She'll have awesome insight on all these players. Her eye for the game is impeccable. I'm really looking forward to that myself. I hope you are too. One more thing I would like to get to today. We got to talk to Tyrese Haliburton this weekend. He had his camp in Indy over the weekend. It just ended. And he got to talk about the team, Summer League, his camp, what's next for him after the contract, all sorts of stuff. Obi Toppin he got to talk about on the record for the very first time, which was fun. Let's talk about everything he had to say to close out today's show. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. In the spirit of Chris Duarte, go listen to Locked On Kings with Matt George. You can hear me talk about Duarte over there, or any other stuff Matt George has to say about the Kings offseason, including giving former Pacer Domantas Sabonis $215 million. It's a lot of money. He deserved it. He had a great year last year. Let's talk about Haliburton, who we got to see out at the factory, Jeff Teague's Project Gym out on Crawfordsville Road on the west side of town. Really fun that Haliburton's camp was there. I think it was originally supposed to be this coming weekend at Warren Central, and then it got moved because that man has a busy summer coming because he's playing for Team USA, as has been revealed for a while. We'll talk more about international Pacers stuff a little later in the summer, closer to the FIBA World Cup. Haliburton, though, playing for Team USA is a part of his summer, but it was good to see him, and it was good to see him, too, because, look, the timing just kind of happened this way, but Haliburton is such a, well-connected to the community person and understands the impact he has in every situation he's in. In fact, if you want to listen to the whole interview I'm about to talk about, it's on the Locked On Pacers YouTube channel. ProCamp was kind enough to let me do that. So he talked about at his when he signed his contract extension, Tyrese Haliburton was up on the podium, and one of the first things he was saying, again, this man just signed a $260 million contract. He said, "It's really important for me that I'm invested in this community moving forward. I want to pay back being able to be in this community and be in this environment." And then less than 10 days later, he's hosting a camp in Indy for kids. I mean, that's exactly what you want to see from a face of a franchise kind of player, which was great. And it wasn't just lip service. And some guys go to their camp and they're just there. And some guys go to their camp and they're involved and they're excited, and Tyrese Haliburton is cheering on his campers to get to which team's going to make it to 5 layups first. He's helping them make their jumpers. He was just he's the perfect athlete for that setting, and he remembers what it meant to him when he was growing up. And he's got a chaotic summer coming, which I thought was fun to hear about, because one of the things, he set it out to LA, he said, after his camp, and then he'll get ready for Team USA stuff after. But in between, he's got Corey Joseph's wedding on the docket. Former Pacer Corey Joseph, fun backup point guard, who was one of Haliburton's vets when he was with the Kings as a rookie. So that'll be fun for him. And then he's off to Team USA duties. We'll have, again, plenty to come on that. Daniel Tice playing overseas. Duarte. Brissett is playing for Team Canada, but Matherin and Nembhard are not. We'll get to all that later. Again, I'm just high-level stuff now. So he did talk about Obi Toppin. He actually alluded to him after the presser. So the Toppin trade was not official yet, so he couldn't talk about it. He did slip up and say his name, which was pretty funny in our little scrum with him afterwards, but he wasn't technically allowed to talk about him yet. Trade was not official, even though he tweeted about throwing lobs to him during games, which is funny. He said he's really excited, of course, to be playing with him and have him around. Obviously, they pair well together. They have some connection from the 2020 draft class. He said, I think we have a lot of guys that fit the right way and fit our style of basketball. That's something Rick Carlisle's been big on too, is that they had a lot of transition talent, guys that pair very well with Haliburton's gifts and the team's identity going forward. Obi Toppin only adds to that. Haliburton, of course, will make a lot of sense with him. He said similar things about Bruce Brown after that signing happened, so I thought that was fun to hear. Again, you can hear these full comments. Anyway, he thinks the team's still going to play fast this year. I don't think that's any secret or any surprise, but the fact that that's been discussed as much as it has this summer from so many different people means I think that's going to be something the Pacers actively try to do. And hey, you can only get out in transition and run and be a fast-paced team with short offensive possessions if you get stops. If you're pulling the ball to the net all the time, it's not going to matter. So as good as it is that the Pacers have this identity they're leaning into, they've got to be a better defensive team. If they want to be that team, I think they recognize that, and I think Haliburton does as well. And they added defensive talent. I think Bruce Brown's going to be really good for this Pacers team. He also talked about watching the Summer League Pacers. He watched every single game, which, man, I mean, we were in sickos territory near the end. That's an internet meme. I'm not actually calling anyone a sicko, but it was fun to watch those last games. Haliburton said he enjoyed watching them. He watched all 5, he said. Well, the 5th one hadn't happened yet, but he's going to watch all 5. And for him, that's important. And for the guys on the team, that's important because, they can see synergy and see clips and watch full games if they want. But this is their first time, especially live, when most of them are in Vegas, to see these guys play 5-on-5. See Jarris Walker, see Ben Shepherd, all the draftees play 5-on-5. That's a big point of scouting and learning something about your teammates. So that was pretty valuable. Haliburton said he thought Andrew Nembhard looked too good for Summer League after the very first game. He said he told Chad Buchanan, general manager, and Kevin Pritchard, president of basketball operations, he said he's too good. He shouldn't be playing. Nembhard ended up playing 2 games, was even better in the second game, and that was it for Andrew Nembhard, who had an awesome Summer League as the backup one. Something Haliburton alluded to is that position for him. And he also thought the team was really active, and that stood out to him, especially on the defensive end, which is important, right? They're going to need to be active on that end of the floor if they're going to be better. They got stagnant on the perimeter so much last year. They allowed so many blow-bys. And on Jarris Walker, Tyrese Haliburton said he has great instincts and, quote, fits perfect, unquote. The last thing he said, only very smallly adjacent to the Pacers, is he's excited that Georges Niang, former Pacer, is back in the division with the Cavs. I think he said he's never beaten Niang in a game in the pros. They're best friends, dating back to their Iowa State days. So now 4 Pacers-Cavs games a year. That will be significant. I might have fact-checked that incorrectly, but I believe he said he's never beaten him, which was fun. You can read more about this interview on Pacers SI. Haliburton working to be the best version of himself every day. His camp was the next part of that. You can listen to the full interview on the Locked On Pacers YouTube channel, but that is the highlights. It was about a 6.5-minute conversation, so trying to squeeze out everything he said in that time into this segment. Thank you all for listening today and getting through all of the Summer League episodes, the rumor episodes. Funnily enough, we did one last Friday about TJ McConnell being involved with the Suns, potentially. Cam Payne was involved, and that got traded over the weekend, so that one was already dead. Campaign for McConnell straight up. I actually said this wrong last week. Illegal trade because of the new CBA and the Suns now being over the second apron. So that actually had to be a bigger trade than reported anyway. So that one seemed unlikely, and now it seems even less likely. But anyway, if you want the latest on the rumor front, last week the McConnell podcast was Friday. The Pascal Siakam one was Tuesday. But nothing new on the free agency front, and Summer League's done. So tomorrow, again, talking Summer League with Caitlin, getting through every player, every key thing from the time out there. We'll grade. We'll talk about other moves around the league that were important. We'll talk about grading the Pacers summer and more this week as we really get into the deep part of the offseason. Hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. We will see you tomorrow.